was late September last year. My boyfriend had just broken up with me, and I was having a really hard time dealing with it. The apartment we shared for 4 years, where I now live alone, was filled with sadness, emotion, and painful memories. But it wasn't until I found out a month after he left that he was dating one of my good friends that I had to get away. I needed space and time away from the terrible mess I suddenly found myself in. I spent a couple of nights online, exploring my options, and found a charming Airbnb cottage in a quiet upstate town, perfect for a peaceful retreat. The host, an older gentleman named Richard, seemed very accommodating during our initial conversations. He sent me detailed instructions on how to access the house and mentioned he lived nearby in case I needed anything. I felt grateful for the years I put into becoming a good enough online copywriter that I could do this full-time, as having the freedom to work from anywhere, I was able to book the place for a whole month. The cottage was deep in the woods, far from the city. As I drove up the winding tree-lined road, I felt a sense of calm. The cottage itself was picturesque, with a rustic wooden exterior and a small garden out front. Inside, it was even more charming. The decor was a blend of old-world charm and modern comfort. Wooden beams on the ceiling, a cozy fireplace, and vintage furniture made it feel like a step back in time. The updated kitchen and bathroom had all the conveniences I needed. I arrived late in the afternoon, just as the sun was setting. The golden light filtered through the trees. I unpacked my things and settled in, hoping for a few days of peace and quiet. The first night was uneventful. I enjoyed the tranquility, reading a book by the fireplace and sipping on hot tea. The only sounds were the occasional rustle of leaves and the distant hoot of an owl. It felt like a perfect escape from my busy life and the turmoil I left behind. As I settled into the cottage, I began to feel a bit better. The serene surroundings and the isolation seemed to be exactly what I needed to clear my head and figure out my next steps. I was ready to leave behind the betrayal and heartbreak, at least for a little while, and find some much-needed peace. On the second night there, however, everything changed. I was jolted awake by a faint knocking at the door around midnight. My heart started pounding as I lay there, listening. I got out of bed and cautiously approached the door. "Who is it?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's Richard," a voice replied. "There's an emergency. I need to check something inside." Relieved but still nervous, I opened the door. Richard, looking worried, stepped inside. "There have been reports of break-ins in the area," he explained. "I want to make sure everything is secure." We went around the house together, checking windows and doors. Everything seemed fine, but Richard's nervousness made me uneasy. After we finished, he told me to lock everything and be extra careful. Then he left, disappearing into the darkness. The next day, I tried to contact Richard to thank him for his concern and to find out more about these break-ins, but he didn't respond. Another night went by of not getting much sleep as I was so nervous, I was aware of every sound. Feeling uneasy when I had not heard from Richard by the following afternoon, I reached out to Airbnb support. They informed me that Richard's account had been deactivated months ago, and they couldn't reach him either. My heart sank. Who had I let into the house last night? That night, I was even more on edge. Around midnight, I heard the same knocking at the door. This time, I didn't answer. The knocking turned into banging, and then I heard the sound of the front door being forced open. After a moment of cold panic and fear, I felt every bit of survival instinct in me kick in. I got out of the bed, grabbed my phone and the fire poker I had brought upstairs to keep next to the bed, and tiptoed into the bedroom bathroom, climbing into the shower to hide. I called 911 and whispered my situation and the address. I could hear the intruder moving through the house, searching each room. When he entered the bedroom, I hung up and held my breath, praying he wouldn't find me. He shone a flashlight around the room, and I had to control myself to not try to take a peek through the shower curtain, as I could not risk him finding me. After what felt like an eternity, the intruder moved on, continuing to search the house. I stayed hidden, too scared to move. Then suddenly, my phone rang. I forgot to put it on mute. I heard something fall downstairs and then it went quiet. That's when the intruder's steps became incredibly purposeful as I heard him head back up the stairs. At the same time, finally, I heard the sound of sirens in the distance. The intruder must have heard them too, because he quickly left the house. I stayed in the shower until I heard the police arrive and call out for me. They found me shaken and in shock and calmed me down with some sugared water and a blanket they wrapped around me. They searched the house and found no one, but the back door had been pried open. The police told me that the man was likely a local mystery man and current owner of the cottage, known for targeting Airbnb guests. They told me that the real Richard had left the area months before and that he sold the property to a Howard Hayes, but that no one in the area has ever met a Howard Hayes. The new owner keeps a very low profile, and they have been suspecting he continues to rent the cottage through a fake Airbnb page pretending to be Richard. They were still trying to understand his motives, but what they do know is that guests over the last couple of months have left almost as soon as they arrived, and no one has any idea what happens in that cottage. The whole thing seemed so warped, I had no idea how to make any sense of it. I felt compelled to get involved and decided to use my network of online gurus to trace the sale of the cottage and try to find out who this Howard Hayes really was. I reached out to a few friends who were experts in cybersecurity and real estate records. Within a few days, we started uncovering some disturbing details. It turned out that the cottage had been sold under suspicious circumstances, with the trail leading to a series of fake identities and shell companies. The more we dug, the more we realized that this Howard Hayes wasn't just a common criminal. He had a twisted obsession with the cottage and its guests, orchestrating events to instill fear and control. With the information we gathered, I shared everything with the police. They were amazed at how much we had uncovered and decided to put me up in a nearby hotel while they worked with me on the investigation. Over the next 2 weeks, we pieced together a case against him, gathering enough evidence to incriminate him. We discovered that he had been watching the guests through hidden cameras and had detailed logs of their movements and behaviors. His sinister intentions went beyond robbery. He derived pleasure from the terror he caused. The authorities were ready to make an arrest, but when they went to apprehend him, he was gone. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. The last trace of any credit card or communication on his fake website was from 10 days ago. Despite their best efforts, the authorities couldn't find any leads. It was like he had fallen off the face of the earth. During those 2 weeks, I grew very connected to the little community. The residents were grateful for my intervention and for bringing my city smarts to help them rid their town of this evil energy. I felt a sense of belonging that I hadn't felt in a long time. They welcomed me with open arms, and their gratitude made me feel like a hero. Though the mystery of Howard Hayes remained unsolved, I found solace in the fact that I had helped bring some peace back to this quiet town. The community and I formed a bond that turned this terrifying experience into something positive. The little town became my regular vacation spot, a place where I found new friends and a sense of purpose. Even though the fear of that night still lingered, I knew I had made a difference. The authorities continued to monitor for any sign of Howard Hayes, but as far as they knew, he had disappeared completely. The community moved forward, and I found a new haven where I could truly escape and heal. Early last summer, I needed a quiet place to finish my first novel. I had recently quit my safe but mundane post office job to pursue my true passion, writing. I put everything on the success of this novel, believing it was my best shot to make a name for myself. Living in a house with roommates in their 20s, glancing between work and partying made it impossible to focus. I needed a place where I could be inspired and finish the final stretch of my novel. I found an Airbnb in a picturesque coastal town that seemed perfect. The listing showed a small, affordable, cozy apartment on the ground floor with a little deck that had a side view of the ocean. It seemed perfect for a peaceful retreat where I could focus on my writing. When I arrived, the building looked more run down than in the photos. The paint was peeling, and the garden was overgrown. Still, I was determined to make the best of it. As I unlocked the door and stepped inside, the apartment felt a bit neglected. The furniture was worn, and there was a faint smell of dampness in the air. But it had charm, with wooden floors and a small fireplace. I decided it was good enough for a few days of writing and relaxation. I settled in, unpacking my things and setting up my laptop on the small dining table. The view from the deck was nice, with the ocean in the distance and the sound of waves crashing gently. As I prepared dinner, I heard footsteps outside. I peeked through the window but saw nothing. Shrugging it off as wildlife or a neighbor, I continued cooking. Later, while watching TV, I heard the footsteps again, this time accompanied by the creaking of the deck. Feeling a bit uneasy, I checked the front door to make sure it was locked and went to bed. But as I lay there in the dark, the silence seemed oppressive. Every creak and groan of the old building made me more aware of how alone I was. The wind rustled through the trees, casting eerie shadows on the walls. I pulled the blankets tighter around me, trying to shake off the unsettling feeling that had settled over me. I told myself it was just my imagination running wild, a consequence of too many late-night horror movies and the stress of my self-imposed deadline. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, and this was just the beginning. Later that night, I woke up to the sound of my bedroom door creaking open. Completely startled, I reached for my phone and turned on the flashlight. The door was ajar, but no one was there. I got up and searched the apartment, my nerves on edge. The wind outside howled, rattling the windows and making me jump at every gust. I checked the front door and the windows to ensure they were locked. Everything seemed in order, but I couldn't shake the terrible feeling of being watched. I locked the bedroom door and tried to go back to sleep, but the eerie feeling lingered. The sense of isolation in this quiet building made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. The next day, I decided to explore the town. It was a charming place with quaint shops, friendly locals, and beautiful ocean views. The sunlight and the bustling activity of the town made me feel better, temporarily pushing away the unease from the night before. I found a perfect spot on a terrace cafe where I enjoyed a very productive few hours working and eating. I head back to the apartment in the afternoon, annoyed that I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling from the night before. I wanted to write some more, but this was not what I had hoped for when I imagined an inspiring space. When I opened the door, a distinct smell of cigarette smoke hit me. I didn't smoke, and I knew I hadn't left anything burning. The smell was strong and unsettling, permeating the air like an unwelcome guest. I checked every room, trying to find the source of the smell, but everything seemed normal. The windows were closed, and there were no signs of anyone having been inside. The lingering smell of smoke was mixed with a faint, musty odor, like old books left too long in a damp basement. The eerie feeling from the night before came back stronger. Determined to understand what was going on, I decided to check the rest of the building. I ventured into the dimly lit hallway, the floors creaking under my weight. The hallway was lined with closed doors, each one seemingly more ominous than the last. As I walked, I noticed a flickering light coming from under one of the doors. My pulse quickened as I approached, but when I knocked, there was no answer. The building was silent, except for the occasional groan of the old structure. I walked up the dirty stairs, my footsteps echoing in the empty hallways. What I found completely creeped me out. The apartments above mine were all empty, their doors wide open, leading into dark, vacant spaces. As I peered into the empty rooms, I could tell they had not been occupied for months. The silence was deafening, and the darkness seemed to swallow the light. The feeling was so eerie, I rushed back downstairs to my apartment, my heart pounding. I was alone, all alone, in this entire 3-story apartment building. I contacted the host and tried to sound calm as though I was just curious about the vacancy of the building, and the host quickly replied that they had just recently bought the previously abandoned building, and that they are renovating the apartments one by one and renting out as ready. He sounded matter-of-fact, and I had no reason to suspect that there was anything more sinister about it. Although I told myself to man up and stop overthinking it, I just couldn't get comfortable. That night, I barricaded the bedroom door with a chair and kept a heavy lamp by the bed as a makeshift weapon. Around midnight, I heard someone trying to open the door again. The doorknob rattled, and there was a frustrated grunt followed by footsteps walking away. I could barely breathe. I stayed awake, clutching the lamp tightly, my eyes fixed on the door, waiting for something to happen. In the morning, I cautiously opened the bedroom door. I noticed muddy footprints near the back door, confirming my worst fears. Someone had been inside. I knew I couldn't stay another night. I quickly packed my things, my hands trembling, and left the apartment. I reported the incident to Airbnb, leaving a 1 rating on the property. The host seemed genuinely concerned in their response to my rating. If he did have something to do with it, I preferred not to imagine what his intentions could have been for visiting the apartment at night. And if it is some stranger up to no good taking advantage of the vacancy and isolation of the building, I wanted other guests to know what they were signing up for. After leaving the Airbnb, I couldn't get the experience out of my mind. It was terrifying and surreal, but it also sparked a creative fire in me. I started incorporating the eerie details and unsettling feelings into my novel. The sense of isolation, the unexplained footsteps, and the oppressive silence. All of it found a place in my story. It was as if the fear and tension I experienced became the driving force behind my writing. My editor loved the new direction of the novel, especially the parts inspired by my Airbnb experience. They said it added a layer of realism and suspense that made the story much more compelling. The novel is currently being published, and I am eager to see how it is received. The ordeal not only enhanced my writing, but also taught me something important about channeling real-life fears into art. The unsettling experience, which initially felt like a setback, turned out to be a blessing in disguise. It gave my story the authenticity and depth it needed, transforming my work from just another novel into a gripping tale of suspense and fear. As I wait for my book to hit the shelves, I can't help but feel a mix of excitement and nervousness. The very experience that nearly drove me away from my dream might now be the cornerstone of my success. Sometimes, the scariest moments in life have the potential to become the most powerful stories, and I can't wait to see how readers react to the fear and tension that haunted me during those sleepless nights. As an event planner in the city, I'm usually busy organizing other people's lives, but this particular trip last summer was special. I was finally reuniting with my college friends after several years. We'd rented a large modern Airbnb in a popular tourist town. The place was perfect, spacious, with an open floor plan, multiple bedrooms, and even a basement. The house was within walking distance of restaurants, shops, and all the tourist spots we wanted to check out. As I drove up to the house, I felt a mix of excitement and nostalgia. The house was impressive, with its sleek design and large windows that let in plenty of light. Inside, it was just as beautiful. The living room was huge, with comfortable sofas and a big TV. The kitchen had all the latest gadgets, and each bedroom was cozy and inviting. We couldn't wait to start our 10-day vacation together. The first night, we settled in, exploring the house and catching up on old times. We laughed, cooked dinner together, drank wine, and made plans for the next few days. Everything felt perfect. The town was lively, and we could hear the distant sounds of music and laughter from the nightlife nearby. It felt like a dream getaway, but as night fell, the house seemed to change. The large windows that had let in so much light during the day now made me feel exposed. The shadows in the room seemed deeper, and every little noise made me jump. Annoyed by my overactive imagination, I told myself to get a grip. Instead, I thought about what a fun, relaxing time this was going to be with my friends. Little did I know, our perfect reunion was about to turn into a nightmare. On the second night, we were all hanging out in the living room, laughing and telling stories. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. We all looked at each other, puzzled. Who could it be at this hour? I got up and opened the door to see a man in a utility worker's uniform standing there. He had a serious look on his face. "Hi, I'm from the gas company," he said, holding up an ID badge. "There's been a gas leak reported in the area. I need to check your lines for safety." We didn't know much about gas leaks, but his uniform and ID looked official. My friends and I exchanged glances, and we decided to let him in. He seemed very professional and walked around the house, checking various appliances in the basement. As he worked, he explained what he was doing, which made us feel a bit more comfortable. He even pointed out some things about gas safety that none of us knew. After about 20 minutes, he thanked us and said everything was fine. He assured us there was no leak and that we were safe. We were relieved and saw him out. We talked about how lucky we were to have someone come by and check. It seemed like just another part of our adventure. The next morning, as we were getting ready for the day, we started to notice that some things were missing. My friend Jane couldn't find her laptop, and I realized my cash was gone. Then, someone else noticed that a piece of jewelry was missing. Panic set in as we realized we had been duped by the fake utility worker. We immediately contacted the host, who was shocked and informed us that no inspections had been scheduled. We then called the police and reported the incident, feeling both scared and foolish for letting a stranger into the house so easily. The police arrived quickly after our call. They took our statements and examined the house. When we told them about the utility worker, their expressions became serious. The officer in charge explained that there had been similar incidents in the area. An imposter had been using a fake uniform and ID to gain access to homes, stealing valuables while pretending to conduct inspections. This news made us feel incredibly vulnerable. We had let a criminal into our home without a second thought. That night I tried to sleep, but I couldn't get my mind to switch off. Every creak and groan of the old house made me sit up and listen intently. At one point, I heard faint noises coming from the basement. I tried to ignore it, but I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. I lay awake for hours, listening, every sound making me more and more anxious. The following evening, after a nice dinner out, we returned to the house. As we walked up to the door, I noticed it was slightly ajar. My stomach dropped. We exchanged worried looks and slowly pushed the door open. Inside, the house was eerily quiet. We tiptoed in, afraid of what we might find. It didn't take long to realize that more items were missing. More cash, a camera, and some of our clothes. Panic set in. We realized the imposter might still be inside. Feeling a mix of fear and determination, I grabbed a kitchen knife and decided to check the basement with my friend Jake. We moved as quietly as we could, the wooden steps creaking under our weight. When we reached the basement door, it was unlocked. We slowly opened it and descended the stairs. The basement was dark and cold. With trembling hands, I turned on the light. What we saw made my blood run cold. There were signs that someone had been living there. Discarded food, a sleeping bag, and personal items scattered around. My breath caught in my throat as I heard footsteps above us. The imposter was still in the house. We looked at each other, eyes wide with fear. We needed to get out, but we couldn't risk alerting the intruder. We slowly made our way back up the stairs, the sounds above us growing louder. Just as we reached the top, the basement door creaked open. We froze, holding our breaths, praying not to be discovered. The footsteps paused, then moved away. Seizing the moment, we bolted up the remaining steps and ran out the front door, the rest of our friends following as we all shouted our way out of the house. We didn't stop running until we were safely in a neighbor's house, calling the police once again. The police searched the area and found the imposter a few blocks away, trying to make his escape. They apprehended him quickly. He was identified as a local criminal with a history of home invasions and theft. The relief I felt knowing he was caught was immense, but the fear still lingered. The police recovered most of our stolen items and assured us that the imposter would be prosecuted. Shaken but relieved, my friends and I decided to cut the trip short and return home. The excitement and joy we had felt at the beginning of our reunion were replaced with anxiety and fear. Reflecting on the experience, I felt grateful that nothing worse had happened. However, I was deeply disturbed by how easily we were fooled. We had let a stranger into our home without a second thought, simply because he wore a uniform and had an ID badge. The incident served as a stark reminder of the importance of vigilance and caution, even in seemingly safe environments.